John 2:13. Since the Passover of the Jews was near, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. He found in the temple area those who sold oxen, sheep, and doves, as well as the money changers seated there. He made a whip out of cords and drove them all out of the temple area, where the sheep and oxen, and spilled the coins of the money changer and overturned their tables. And to those who sold doves, he said, "Take these out of here and stop making my Father's house into a marketplace." Hi, my name is William James Lindberg, and this is the Chapel of Poetry. And in this space, we, you and I, can celebrate the word of our fellow human beings, those words that fall down from the sky like stars to be heard in the ear and transmuted from lead into gold on the page. And in this episode of the Chapel of Poetry, we will be delving into the word of Brandon Pitts in his new book, Tender in the Age of Furry. It was published by Mosaic Press in 2016. And Brandon Pitts, like one of the other poets that I read earlier, like a month or so ago, Gene Vayner, in his book Tears of Silence, a meditation, is from Canada. Brandon Pitts is a Canadian, but currently he resides in the greater Seattle area, which is where I met him at the Everett Poetry Night, hosted by Dwayne Kirby Jensen. And I wanted to make a shout out there for Everett Poetry Night, is that it was, when I lived up in the Seattle area, he was on my top 5 list of favorite open mics to go to. The first being Works in Progress at Hugo House, but that's all different now because the Hugo House is someplace else, and I think it's becoming not so great of an open mic. And then there was Everett Poetry Night, and then the Poets West one at Columbia City, which doesn't exist anymore either. And then the Seattle Poetry Slam, and another Poets West one out at Green Lake Library. And anyways, what you will hear in Brandon's poetic tongue is a lot of, in this selection of poems, there's a lot of biblical images that he has, that he's used and he's repurposed to explain or to express the geopolitical nature of our world today. And on the surface of his poems, they seem obscure, just like Matt Crary's poems were obscure, and in a sense that the Rubaiyat of the Omar Khayyam's poems also were obscure as well. That you had to take some work, you have to do some work to ferret out the meaning, or ferret out what the depth of those poetic images. And let's see, what else did I want to say before we started? Anyways, without any further ado, I'm going to begin with Pontius Pilate. I hath abandoned peace for violence, nurture for remorse, given up on love only to love the stripper of destruction, rejected into acceptance of drink and the false high of worn concepts. I abandoned her for you, and you abandoned me for him. Put aside convention to eat from the plate of life, and walk through the houses of fate before I break into 1,000 unfixable pieces. But the spirits doth guide me, and the devil approved when I strayed, and the Lord of hosts forgave my blasphemy. For I was tender in the age of fury. God bless. The admonition to my children. The madness of my forefathers has called to haunt, like a bony knuckle tapping on my door. Its authority has my house surrounded, facing its warrant. I have no place to go. I cannot outrun this centuries-old apparition. Its spindly appendages crawls into my ear when I'm sleeping, thrusting me into waking dreams, the horrible breath whispering deceit and lies. I have no reason to humor it. It's like a tumor that grows, pushing aside my healthy brain, making room by the fire to taunt me while keeping me company. The insanity of my ancestors has come to call, bringing with it the turmoil that came before me, memories of those who could not get out of bed, who tried to bar the windows with whores and hash, who washed in booze or preferred not eating, to the fast end of a bullet in the temple from a gun. Kennewick Man. Crow, silence, so thick I can hear heat rise from the desert plain, where the jarring scratch of the sun-baked beetle points me north to sequoia and snow-capped giants, to rivers flow, and my time of dying, the dawning of the calendar days, until a burning need from the east seeps through the land to pull me from the water, so souls with good intentions can pick at my weary bones. John 2:13. And this is the last one I'm going to read in this set. John 2:13. Yeshua ben Joseph, bring them to their knees, demanding respect. Strike them in retribution, leaving bloody welts in the place of entitlement, righting the wrongs, redistributing wealth by overturning the tables as fallen coins echo off the dome in the hall. Lash them, my Jesus, strike their skin, bring down thy fire upon their backs with your whip of cords, ignoring pleas for clemency and compassion. O dispassionate Christ, whip them with inspired arm and leave them bleeding and poor. Smote them with thine holy strap so they turn the other cheek, ready for the second smack. Flog them, dear Lord, chasing them as they run. There's a lot of power in these poems. In the Kennewick Man, I was thinking, when I was reading that, I was thinking of Dylan Thomas. And in my time of dying, the dawning of calendar days, until a burning need from the east seeps through the land, to pull me from water so souls with good intention can pick at my weary bones. That one, there was a, in the time of my dying, the dawning of the calendar days, until a burning need from the east seeps through the land. And I've listened to a lot and read a lot of Dylan Thomas's poems. But these, as you can see, are much more straightforward than Dylan Thomas's poems are, which are, he crafted his words to be music on the page with rhythm and with melody. And of course, it's a really hard number to try to come up above. But Brandon has a lot of good word rhythms in on his lines, and his really nice tight lines, kind of like Charles Bukowski's poems, which has really tight lines and makes them easy to read. And long lines, in my own journey as a writer, I started out with long lines, and I've been working to make shorter lines. And I think that long lines it's not always so, but often it is that long lines are where a writer starts from, with lots of words and lots of compact wordy stuff, and then as a writer progresses or evolves in their career as a poet writer, the lines get more condensed and tighten down, and then they just you just start to flourish from there. And Brandon, as a writer, is very, very good. And so, I mean, one of my lines I liked here in Pontius Pilate is that I have abandoned peace for violence, and that speaks so much about our world today in this country, where we are not peaceable. We are not a peaceable people, but we are a war-mongering people. And though maybe many of the people don't want war, but it seems that the powers that be, that they want war. And they want more war because war means money. And it seems to me that Christianity today, or Protestant Christianity today, wants more war. It seems to be that they just want to be a more war-mongering people, that they, in their votes at the ballot box, they're not voting for peace because they're always voting for war. The Republican Party, which is the warmongering party, and the party that wants more war. But it also seems now that the Democrat Party is also the party for war. And so if you want to be a peaceable person, you aren't really given any choices. We don't have any choices except the party for war, more war, that we have abandoned peace for violence. And that is a terrible evil that we as Americans, we inflict upon the world. We inflict this evil of warfare upon the world. And as a people, we have no voice to bring ourselves back to a place of peace. And those are some of the things that I see here. This to love the stripper of destruction, the false high of worn concepts, and those worn concepts that we keep on repeating and repeating, is that we just keep on solving problems the same old way all the time with more violence. And Pontius Pilate, and there's just a lot of narratives that are here in his poems. And it's really kind of amazing to be able to read through works that are so deep. And I'm going to include in the description below a link to where you can find his book, Tender in the Age of Fury. And I'm going to do another reading for the next time about just one poem, and that poem is Nimrod. And that one is like really super deep. And I'm going to finish by rereading John 2:13. I'm going to read the whole 13 through 19. Since the Passover of the Jews was near, Jesus went up to Jerusalem. He found in the temple area those who sold oxen, sheep, and doves. as well as the money changers seated there. He made a whip out of cords and drove them all out of the temple area with the sheep and oxen, and spilled the coins of the money changers and overturned their tables. And to those who sold doves he said, "Take these out of here and stop making my Father's house a marketplace." His disciples recalled the words of Scripture, Zeal for your house will consume me." And this the Jews answered and said to him, "What sign can you show us for doing this?" Jesus answered and said to them, "Destroy this temple, and 3 days I will raise it up." The Jews said, "This temple has been under construction for 46 years, and you will raise it up in 3 days?" But he was speaking about the temple of his body. Therefore, when he was raised from the dead, his disciples remembered that he had said this, and they came to believe the Scripture and the word Jesus had spoken. While he was in Jerusalem for the feast of the Passover, many began to believe in his name when they saw the signs he was doing. But Jesus would not trust himself to them because he knew them all and did not need anyone to testify about human nature. He himself understood it well. Thank you, and good night.